I never thought the people who shared my blood would one day become my greatest enemies. You grow up believing that family means safety, that no matter what storms life throws at you, your brothers will stand by your side. But life has a cruel way of proving you wrong. I still remember the day everything changed. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind where the sun felt warm and the air smelled like home. But behind those calm skies, a storm was already building, one I didn't see coming until it was too late. My brothers, the same boys I once defended at school, the same faces that laughed with me in childhood, had already made a decision that would tear my world apart. They didn't just betray me, they erased me. Do you know what it feels like when your entire existence is brushed aside, like you never mattered? When the people who should protect you are the ones plotting behind your back? That was my reality. And it all started with one thing: our land that held our family's history, land that carried the sweat of my father's hands, the dreams of my mother's eyes. It wasn't just soil and trees. It was home. It was Marie. It was us. And to them, it was nothing but profit. They thought I would stay silent, that I would fold under their betrayal, that I would simply walk away and let them win. But what they didn't know was that I had fire in me, and that fire was about to burn everything they held dear. Our land was more than a place. It was a story written in earth and stone. As children, we would run through the fields barefoot, the dust clinging to our ankles while the wind carried our laughter. My father would sit beneath the neem tree, his deep voice rolling like thunder as he told us about the sacrifices his father made, how each corner of this land held the echoes of struggle, sweat, and love. To me, it was sacred. To my brothers, it slowly turned into something else. As we grew older, I noticed their eyes lingered not on the memories, but on the numbers. They talked less about family and more about profit. They dreamed of cars, businesses, and city life. At first, I thought it was a harmless ambition. But ambition, when unchecked, can rot into greed. They began meeting strangers in hushed tones, walking the land with buyers I didn't recognize, measuring boundaries as if carving me out of the story. I asked questions, but my concerns were brushed aside with mocking smiles. You wouldn't understand, they said. This is men's business. I trusted them for longer than I should have. Because family is supposed to mean trust, isn't it? But slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. The laughter I once shared with them was replaced by whispers behind closed doors. The warmth of brotherhood grew cold, and the home I thought was unshakable began to crack beneath the weight of betrayal. One evening, as I was helping my mother prepare the evening meal, I overheard them in the next room. Their voices were sharp, filled with greed. She has no right, one of them spat. Once the papers are signed, she's nothing. My hands trembled as I stirred the pot, my heart sinking with every word. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the people I trusted most were preparing to erase me from my own life. The day of betrayal came without warning. I was called into the room, told to sign papers I didn't fully understand. They smiled, pretended it was routine, but their eyes betrayed them. My father's name, my childhood, my memories, all trapped in those documents, waiting to be stolen. When I refused, their smiles turned sharp, their voices rose. "You don't belong here anymore," one said. The words cut deeper than any blade. They had already decided my fate. The land was sold, the money divided, and I was cast aside like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. My heart broke as I watched them celebrate their victory, the very soil beneath my feet slipping away. I left that house with a small bundle in my hands, but the real weight I carried was inside me. Every step away from the land felt like my body was being pulled apart, like pieces of me were still trapped behind those gates. I didn't cry in front of them. No, I held my tears back until I was alone, sitting under the same neem tree where my father once told his stories. That was where the silence finally broke, where I let myself fall apart. My sobs echoed into the night, raw and heavy, as if the earth itself was mourning with me. It wasn't just the loss of land, it was the loss of belonging. For years, I believed family meant loyalty, but now I was nothing more than an outsider, stripped of my name and my place. People in the village started whispering. Some pitied me, others judged me. In their eyes, I had been cast out, defeated. Days blurred into nights. I stayed with a distant relative in a small, dimly lit room, the kind where every shadow feels heavier than it should. I barely ate. I barely spoke. The betrayal sat inside me like a stone pressing against my chest. But in that silence, something else began to grow. At first, it was just a spark of question whispered in the back of my mind. Why should they win? Why should I accept this fate? I replayed every moment, every cruel word, every mocking laugh. The pain didn't weaken me, it sharpened me. It was as if my tears were carving out a new version of me, someone harder, someone who could rise from the ashes of what they had destroyed. I started walking the fields at night, hidden from their eyes. I traced the borders of the land, whispering my father's words under my breath, as if reminding myself that I was still connected to it, no matter what they tried to erase. And slowly, a plan began to take shape. I didn't know all the details yet, but I knew one thing. I would not stay broken. I would not stay silent forever. They thought they had shut me out. They thought they had buried me under their greed. But what they didn't understand is that silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is the seed of something greater. And deep inside me, revenge was already starting to bloom. For weeks, I lived like a shadow. I avoided the village paths where gossip spread faster than the wind. I kept my head down, but my ears open. And while my brothers celebrated their so-called victory, I watched. Because when people think you are broken, they stop hiding. They talk freely, they make mistakes, and they forget that silence has eyes. One evening, while returning from the well, I overheard two men speaking about my brothers. Their words struck me like lightning. They rushed the deal too fast. Forged signatures. If anyone finds out, they'll be finished. Forged signatures. I froze in my tracks. My heart raced, But this time, it wasn't fear, it was fire. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had broken the law. And laws, unlike family loyalties, could not be twisted so easily. That night, I began searching through old trunks and drawers at my relative's house. My father was a careful man, one who never trusted the shifting winds of the world. And there, wrapped in a bundle of cloth, I found what I didn't even know I had been searching for: original land documents, bearing his handwriting, his seal, his signature. Documents that tied the land not just to my brothers, but to me as well. I held those papers like they were gold. For the first time since being cast out, I felt strength rushing back into me. Proof, evidence. My father's voice, preserved in ink, is standing by my side, but I knew documents alone weren't enough. I needed allies. And sometimes allies come from the most unexpected places. One was an old friend of my father's, a retired clerk who once worked in the land registry office. He remembered my family well, and when I showed him the papers, his eyes widened. "Child, this changes everything," he whispered. "They can try to erase you, but the land itself remembers." The second ally came in silence, an elderly woman from the village who had watched me grow up. She came to me one night, carrying whispers of my brother's shady dealings. Buyers cheated, debts unpaid, bribes taken. She told me things even I didn't know, things that painted a picture far darker than I had imagined. Piece by piece, I was gathering not just evidence, but power. My brothers had built their empire on lies, and lies have weak foundations. All it would take was one hard push to bring it all crashing down. As I sat in that dimly lit room, papers spread out before me, I felt something shift inside. I was no longer the sister they had thrown away. I was no longer the victim. I was the storm waiting at their door. And soon they would hear the thunder. The plan formed in silence, one step at a time. I visited the courthouse quietly, filing my complaint with trembling hands but a steady heart. I made copies of the documents and gave them to people I trusted so they could not be stolen from me again. I gathered witnesses, people my brothers had cheated, people who were waiting for a voice to rise so they too could speak. The more I dug, the more their mask began to crack. But revenge is not just about paperwork. It is about timing, patience, and precision. I didn't confront them directly. No shouting matches, no reckless anger. I let them believe they had won. I let them laugh, drink, and boast in the village. All the while, I was laying the foundation for their downfall. And when the day finally came, it came not with fists or fire, but with truth taught in court. The evidence spoke louder than my tears ever could. The forged signatures, the hidden debts, the testimonies of those they wronged, it all unfolded like a storm tearing through their lies. My brothers stood there, their faces pale, their voices cracking as the walls they had built crumbled around them. They had thought me weak, but weakness had turned into strength, silence into power. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. When the judge's orders were read, The air in that courtroom felt heavier than stone. My brothers stood there, not as the men who once paraded in new suits, but as people suddenly stripped of their armor. Their eyes no longer held that arrogant gleam. Instead, they flickered with something raw disbelief, fear, shame. They had thought the world would bend for them forever, but now it was the law bending them into a corner. Word traveled quickly. Villagers who once toasted to their victory now whispered in market stalls and at tea shops. The same mouths that praised them now carried rumors of their downfall. Respect turned into suspicion, admiration into pity. Every nod they once received turned into eyes that avoided theirs. That was the nature of betrayal. The same crowd that cheers your rise will gather to watch your fall. The land itself was frozen. No one could touch it until the legal storm cleared. For me, that was already a victory. The soil of my childhood, my father's sweat, my mother's hope, it could not be stolen in silence anymore. It was locked in waiting, held steady until the truth decided its fate. And I was no longer silent, but the aftermath wasn't just about court papers and frozen deeds. It lived inside our home too. My mother's heart carried the deepest wound. She had given birth to us all, and now she had to watch us unravel as enemies. She never raised her voice in anger. Instead, her silence became heavier each day. She would sit by the window, her prayer beads slipping through her fingers, her lips moving in quiet supplication. She wanted healing, but the scars were too fresh daughters for me. The nights were the hardest. When the courtroom emptied and the villagers went home, I would lie awake and feel the weight of it all. Revenge had burned hot in me for so long, but now it was colder, steadier, but still present. I had turned the tables, yes. I had made them regret their betrayal. But the truth? Victory never feels the way you imagine it. It doesn't erase the past. It only changes the present. One evening, as I walked through the village, I saw my younger brother standing alone near the old banyan tree. He didn't notice me at first. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. For the first time, he didn't look like my enemy. He just looked like a broken man. And in that moment, I felt both triumph and sorrow. Triumph because justice had been served. Sorrow because family bonds, once shattered, cannot be pieced back together with just scars showing. The world treated them differently after that. Business partners pulled away. Invitations stopped coming. The very people who had once gathered around their table with music and laughter now avoided their door. They had built their empire on betrayal, and betrayal always collects its debt. But for me, life began to breathe again. Slowly, cautiously, I walked the edges of our land, letting the dust cling to my feet, whispering to myself that no matter what the final ruling would be, I had fought. I had not allowed myself to be erased from history. And in that quiet strength, I found something more valuable than even land. I found my own voice. The aftermath was not about celebration. It was about reflection. I realized then that revenge is not only about destroying the betrayer. It is about reclaiming your dignity, about refusing to let lies stand taller than truth. And so, as the sun set on those heavy months, I stood at the edge of our home and whispered a promise, not to my brothers, not to the village, but to myself. I will never again allow silence to bury me. I will never again be the woman they thought could be pushed aside. The land waited for its final judgment. The court would decide, but me? I had already won the battle that mattered most, the battle of refusing to disappear. Because in the end, revenge wasn't the fire that destroyed me. It was the light that revealed who I truly was. When I look back now, I don't just see betrayal. I don't just see revenge. I see a journey that reshaped me, one I never asked for, but one that made me stronger than I ever imagined I could be. My brothers thought they could silence me, erase me, and bury me under their greed. And for a while they did. But what they didn't understand is that silence is not defeat. Sometimes silence is where strength is born, where fire takes root in the ashes of heartbreak. That revenge gave me back my voice. But it also taught me something deeper. Justice is not about destroying others. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about standing tall when the world pushes you down, about refusing to let lies write your story. Family betrayal cuts the deepest because it comes from those you love the most. And yet, even in betrayal, there is a lesson. I learned that loyalty is not proven by blood, but by actions. That truth, no matter how long it is buried, always rises. And that dignity, once reclaimed, shines brighter than any wealth stolen in greed to anyone who has been betrayed. Silenced or cast aside, remember this: you are stronger than they believe. The pain you carry can break you, yes, but it can also shape you into someone uncheckable. Revenge may light the path, but the real victory is finding yourself again, unbroken, unafraid, and undeniable. As for me, I no longer walk with my head bowed. I no longer shrink in the shadows of what they tried to take. I walk forward, steady, certain, knowing that betrayal was never the end of my story. It was only the beginning.